My family treated me like trash for years. They kicked me out of my room and forgot my birthday. But when I inherited millions from an unknown aunt, they all came crawling back, and what I did left them speechless. I'm 26 years old, work in finance, and honestly, I need to get this story off my chest because I've been processing everything that happened for months now, and I still can't believe my own family was capable of this. I guess I should start at the beginning. When I was 7 years old and my dad died from a completely unexpected heart attack. It was super traumatic, obviously, and I remember my mom, Nicole, was devastated but tried to stay strong for me. You know, trying to be both mom and dad at the same time. The first few years after that were difficult but manageable. I mean, it was just her and me against the world, and even though I missed my dad like crazy, we had a close relationship. You know what I mean? Everything changed when I turned 14, and my mom met Mark. At first, he seemed like a decent guy. I don't know, normal, I guess. And my mom was happy for the first time in years, so I tried to be happy for her. They got married super fast, like less than a year after meeting. And with Mark came Zachary, his 7-year-old son. And that's when my life became a literal nightmare, but obviously I didn't know it at that moment. Zachary was, how do I put this? A complete asshole. Sorry for the language, but there's no other way to describe it. He had that cocky teenager attitude who thinks he's superior to everyone, and from day one he made it clear that he didn't like me, and that I basically got in the way in his new house, which, by the way, had been my house my entire life. Things started small, passive-aggressive comments, moving my stuff around, using my things without permission. But it escalated super fast. I remember perfectly the day I came home from school and found my new headphones, the ones I had bought with my own birthday money, completely destroyed on my bedroom floor. When I asked Zachary about it, he said, "Oh yeah, I dropped them, sorry," but with a smile that made it clear he wasn't sorry at all. I went to my mom and Mark to complain, thinking that obviously they were going to do something about it, but Mark basically told me they were just headphones, not to be so dramatic, and my mom said nothing, literally nothing. She just looked at me with that expression like, "Don't make this harder," and I just stood there thinking, is this really happening? That became like the pattern that was established for the next few years. Zachary did whatever he wanted. I was the problem if I complained, and my mom never defended me. Never. And the thing is, I kept trying, I kept thinking that eventually things would get better, that they just needed time to adjust to being a blended family or whatever. But then, when I was like 15, my mom and Mark announced they were expecting a baby. Matthew was born a few months later, and I'm not gonna lie, he was a cute baby and all, but with him came another wave of changes that basically erased me from the family equation completely. The first thing was, they kicked me out of my room. My room. Where I had lived since I was a kid. Where all my memories of my dad were. Everything. They told me they needed to convert it into a nursery for Matthew because it was the biggest and brightest room, and that I should move to the guest room, which was basically a glorified closet. When I protested, Mark told me to stop being selfish, that the baby needed space, and my mom again said nothing in my defense. She just packed my stuff while I was at school, and when I got home, everything was already in the other room. They didn't even give me a chance to process the situation or pack my own things myself. It was super emotionally violent, like, that was the moment where I started to realize that I really didn't matter in that house. I was just a burden they had to tolerate until I turned 18. Zachary got worse over time. He didn't just destroy my stuff, he also ate my food from the fridge, even though it had my name on it, used my laptop without permission, invited people over when I was studying, and they made a horrible racket. And always, when I complained, I was the problem. Mark would tell me I was too sensitive, that I needed to learn to share, that we were family now and families support each other. But the thing is that support only went in one direction, you know what I mean? I had to put up with everything and not complain, but Zachary could do whatever he wanted without consequences. I started spending less and less time at home. I joined a bunch of clubs at school, theater, debate, whatever, just so I wouldn't be there. I got a part-time job at a coffee shop near school when I turned 16, and basically all my weekends I spent working or at friends' houses. I had a friend, Daniel, whose family kind of unofficially adopted me, They let me sleep over almost every weekend, and his mom always asked me if everything was okay at home. I think she knew something was wrong, but I never wanted to talk about it. I was embarrassed to admit that my own family treated me like garbage. There was one incident that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. I was 17. It was my birthday, and I came home from school, expecting at least a family dinner or something, the basics. But when I arrived, the house was empty, and there was a note in the kitchen that said, "We went to dinner at the steakhouse to celebrate Mark's promotion. There are leftovers in the fridge." They didn't even bother to invite me to dinner. It was my birthday, and they went to dinner without me. I called my mom, and when she answered, I could hear the restaurant noise in the background, and she said, "Oh, Benjamin, sorry. We forgot to mention it to you, but we already ordered. Can you heat something up at home?" She hung up before I could respond. I sat in the empty kitchen eating cold pizza from the fridge and crying, and I think that was the moment where something inside me broke definitively. Things came to a critical point a few weeks before I turned 18. Zachary, who was like 21 years old at that point and still living at home without working or studying, decided to throw a party while my parents were away for the weekend with Matthew visiting Mark's parents. I stayed in my room trying to ignore the noise, but at some point during the night, someone opened my door and they started using my room as like the VIP area of the party. When I went out to tell them to get out, Zachary pushed me and told me to relax, not to be bitter. The next morning, my room was trashed. There was beer spilled on my carpet, my books were everywhere. Someone had vomited in my trash can. I was so furious that I took pictures of everything and sent them to my mom. When my parents came back, I expected that finally, Zachary would face real consequences. But what happened was that Mark yelled at me for letting the party get out of control, for not having called the police if I couldn't handle the situation, for being irresponsible. I told him it wasn't my party, that he's been locked in my room, that Zachary had invited all those people, but Mark said that didn't matter, that I was part of the family and that I had responsibility for what happened in the house. My mom was standing there saying nothing, rocking Matthew, avoiding my gaze. Zachary didn't even bother to deny anything. He just shrugged and went to his room. I had to clean up the entire mess by myself. That night, I sat in my trashed room and made the decision that as soon as I turned 18, I was leaving. I already had some money saved from my job at the coffee shop. I had applied to college and had a school advisor, Mr. Jacobs, who had been helping me with scholarship applications. He always told me I had potential for something bigger, not to settle for the minimum, and honestly, those conversations with him were the only thing keeping me sane at that time. He knew my situation at home was complicated, although he never went into details, and he helped me apply to universities with housing, programs for students in difficult situations. My 18th birthday came on a Tuesday. There was no celebration, obviously, but I didn't expect one either. That following weekend, when Mark and Nicole were watching TV in the living room, I came downstairs with my backpack and a suitcase I had secretly packed during the week. I told them, "I'm leaving. I found an apartment near campus, and I start working full-time next week." Mark literally laughed in my face. He said something like, "Yeah, right. You'll last 2 weeks before coming back begging us to let you return. You have no idea how the real world works." My mom looked uncomfortable, but, as always, said nothing in my defense. She just mumbled something about hoping I'd think it over. I told them I'd been thinking about it for years, actually, and I left. I lived in a super small apartment, like a studio, for almost 2 years. It wasn't much, but it was mine. You know? Nobody yelled at me. Nobody destroyed my stuff. I could come home and have peace. I worked full-time while going to college at night, studying finance. It was exhausting, but honestly, it was 1,000 times better than living in that house. My mom called me occasionally, but the conversations were super awkward. She'd ask how I was. I'd say fine. And then there'd be a long silence until one of us hung up. She never apologized for anything that happened, never acknowledged how they had treated me. Mark never called, and I was more than happy about that. Then, like 6 months after I moved out, my mom called me to give me an update. She told me that Mark had updated his will, now that Matthew was bigger, and that she just wanted me to know that he had decided to leave everything to his biological children, meaning Zachary and Matthew. She said she hoped I understood, not to take it personally, that Mark just wanted to make sure his children were taken care of. I was quiet for a moment, processing the absolute audacity of that call. I said, "Why are you telling me this? Were you expecting me to be waiting for an inheritance from the man who treated me like garbage for years?" She got defensive and said she just wanted to be transparent, that she didn't want there to be surprises later. I told her the only surprise was that she thought I cared about anything Mark did with his money, and I hung up. We didn't talk for months after that. Life went on. I graduated, got a decent job at a finance firm, started building a real life. I had good friends, a better apartment. I was considering adopting a cat. Things were good, better than good. I was genuinely happy for the first time in years. And then, right when I turned 25, I received a letter from a law firm I had never heard of. The envelope was super formal, like thick, elegant paper, and when I opened it, it turned out to be about my great-aunt Josephine. Honestly, I didn't even know much about her. I knew she existed. I had met some aunts and uncles from my dad's side at funerals and occasional gatherings when I was a kid, but after my dad died, we basically lost contact with that side of the family. Apparently, Aunt Josephine had died a few months earlier, and according to the letter, I was her sole heir. I had to read that part like 3 times because it didn't make sense. Why would she leave me anything? I didn't even remember her well. I went to the lawyer's office, a super professional older woman named Ms. Halper, and she explained everything to me. Turns out Aunt Josephine had been quite wealthy, never married or had children, and had been following my life from afar through Christmas and birthday updates my dad sent by mail when I was a kid. After my dad died, she tried to keep in touch, but my mom basically cut off communication with that side of the family. I don't know why. Aunt Josephine had been monitoring my situation somehow, don't ask me how, and decided to leave me everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Millions of dollars. A beautiful house in a quiet neighborhood, land, a trust fund. I sat in that office unable to process the information, like literally my brain shut down for a few minutes. MS. Halper explained that it was going to take a few months to process all the estate paperwork, but that basically I had just inherited a fortune. I left that office in absolute shock, walked like 6 blocks not knowing where I was going, and then sat on a park bench and just processed. My life had just completely changed in the most unexpected way possible. The first thing I thought was, "Thank you, Aunt Josephine, wherever you are." The second was, "I'm not going to tell anyone yet, especially not my family." But obviously the universe had other plans because like 2 weeks later my mom called me. At first it was normal, asking how I was. But then she casually dropped that they had heard from some relatives that Aunt Josephine had died and that I had gone to see a lawyer. I asked her how she knew that, and she got nervous, said someone mentioned it to her. It didn't matter who. Then she asked directly if I had inherited anything. I told her that wasn't her business, and hung up. I probably should have lied, but I was so angry I didn't even think about it. The calls started almost immediately after that. My mom called every 2 days. Mark started calling me for the first time in years. Even Zachary sent me a text message saying we should reconnect as family. It was so obvious what was happening, it was almost comical. For weeks I ignored all the calls, let them go to voicemail, deleted messages without reading them. But they kept insisting, and the excuses became more and more elaborate and desperate. That they needed help with Matthew's expenses, that Mark was considering expanding his business, but needed capital, that Zachary finally wanted to go to college but needed help with tuition. Everything was basically, "Give me money," but wrapped in family language and excuses. The last straw was when Mark showed up at my door unannounced on a Saturday morning. He rang the doorbell like crazy, and when I opened it there, he was with Matthew, who was like 9 years old at that point. Mark told me we needed to talk about the family's future, that I had responsibilities now that I had resources, that family supports each other. Poor Matthew was standing there not understanding what was happening, and I felt bad for the kid, but I told Mark to leave and not come back. He got aggressive, started yelling that I was ungrateful, that after everything they had done for me, I owed them, that my mom had raised me alone for years. I told him they hadn't done anything for me except make me miserable, and I closed the door in his face. I heard him yelling outside for a few minutes before he left. That night I called MS, Alper, and asked her about restraining orders. She connected me with someone specialized in that area, and I basically started the legal process to keep Mark away from me for harassment. I changed my phone number, removed my address from all the public records I could, blocked all my family members on all social media. I basically disappeared from their radar as much as possible. My mom found a way to send me a letter to my work, which she probably got from LinkedIn or something, and it was basically a massive guilt trip about how I was breaking her heart, how she had always loved me, how she didn't understand why I was being so cruel. She didn't mention once how she had treated me, how she never defended me, how she let Mark and Zachary make my life impossible. She just played the victim. I responded through my lawyer with a cease and desist letter. I basically told them legally not to contact me ever again or face legal consequences, and it worked, more or less. The calls stopped, the messages stopped, the surprise appearances stopped. I finally had peace. Now I'm 26. I live in the house I inherited from Aunt Josephine, which is beautiful and quiet. I have a job I like, close friends who are more family than my biological family ever was, and honestly, I'm at peace with everything. Sometimes I think about Matthew, and I feel bad because he's innocent in all this. Just a kid trapped in a toxic family. Maybe when he's older and can make his own decisions, I'll try to contact him, but for now, keeping distance is best for my mental health. I don't miss my mom. I don't miss Mark. I definitely don't miss Zachary. The only thing I feel is relief that I freed myself from that situation before it destroyed me completely. Last week, I was organizing some old documents and found pictures of when I was a kid with my dad before everything went to hell, and I started thinking about how he would have handled all this. I think he would be proud that I stood up for myself, that I didn't let them walk all over me, that I built something good from a horrible situation. And that's enough for me.